Empire. Will he stay or will he go? And where exactly are the Houston Texans headed? What's up, everybody? It's Mike Jones. Thanks for coming back for another episode of the Football Jones podcast. You can read me at usatoday.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @ByMikeJones. And yes, we're talking about DeShaun Watson and the Houston Texans, who are in the midst of a rebuild, a reorganization of their coaching staff and their front office. And word on the streets is DeShaun Watson's not very happy. We're hearing all kinds of rumors that he's frustrated, that he wants out. We see the Texans have, they're on the market for a new head coach and new general manager. And once again, they're going to the New England Patriots. Well, Bill O'Brien, the coach they just fired, was from the Patriots. They hired a general manager now who is with the Patriots. And so we're going to try to make some sense of it all. And to do so, I've got the help of John McClain of the Houston Chronicle, who really knows this team inside and out. He has covered DeShaun Watson his whole career. He has covered the NFL in Houston for 45 years. And so John McClain knows it all. So we're going to get to it right now.
Welcome to McDonald's. What can I get you today?
Hi, she'll have the quarter pounder with cheese, extra mustard.
No pickles.
And I'll have a 10-piece chicken McNuggets.
And 2 sides of ranch, please.
We've done this before meal. Get it at McDonald's when you get 2 of your faves for just $5.
Limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Single item at regular price.
All right, and here we are with John McClain of the Houston Chronicle, the authority on the Houston Texans. He's going to give us the inside scoop here on what is going on, how we got to this point, and what we can expect going forward. John, how you doing?
Mike, I'm doing great. I hope you're doing well, you and your family. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too. It's been a busy New Year for you. The season ended, and there's just all kinds of stuff swirling around with the Houston Texans. Can you real quick just give us a recap on, were you surprised at all the way that this season played out with Bill O'Brien getting fired early in the season after basically, DeAndre Hopkins gone each year, seeming, putting them in a worse spot against the draft pick and salary cap situations, and then down the stretch of this season, how it all played out. Were you surprised at this at all, or did you kind of see it coming?
There was no way to see it coming, Mike. At this time a year ago, they were coming off a wild card victory over Buffalo. They choked a 24-point playoff lead at Kansas City in the divisional round, lost 51-31. So we're thinking, okay, what are they going to do to be able to win the division the 5th time in 6 years and get this franchise over that divisional hump, which they've never done because they played every divisional game, even going back to division titles under Gary Kubiak. Every divisional round game has been on the road, and they've yet to win one. And they had that 24-point lead, and I started thinking, if they win this game, they're going to host the Titans, the former Oilers, in the AFC Championship game in Houston. It would be the first time a Houston team had been in the AFC Championship game since the 1979 playoffs, and also first time Houston had a chance to win a championship game since the 1961 Oilers. And then I watched it dissipate before my very eyes. But we had no idea that it was going to be this tough. Mike, they had the most brutal schedule I've ever seen. They lost to 5 teams that finished in first place. The teams that beat them were 57 games over 500, despite having no running game, a terrible defense. Because of DeShaun Watson, they were in so many games. They were 2-8 in one-score games after being 8-3 the year before. And in the division, where they beat Jacksonville twice and got swept by Tennessee and Indianapolis, the Titans beat them on the last play both games, once in overtime. And against the Colts, within a 3-week span, they played 2 games when they reached the Colts' 2-yard line in the last minute and fumbled both times. And O'Brien was long gone. Romeo Crennel, who everybody loves, and I hope like crazy, the new coach keeps around in some capacity, like associate head coach or assistant head coach, which Bill O'Brien did. He was a pleasure to deal with after going through the O'Brien hurricane through an 0-4 start. And so the best thing they have to offer a new coach is Watson. Without Hopkins, he had the best season of his career in every statistic. Didn't matter who they put at receiver, he was successful. And that's what he's the most attractive thing they have to offer. And before you ask, Mike, let me tell you, DeShaun Watson will not be traded under any circumstances.
Okay. Well, all right. Thanks for listening to this week's
Thanks a lot, Mike.
That's what we needed to know. So we hear all this swirling around, and when I asked you last week, you had said that. I saw your tweet saying he was not going to be traded, and so I was like, okay, I've got to get you on here so we can talk about this. Why do you feel like that's something that's not going to happen? Because I know that, he's a star. I know he's got a no trade clause, but he has some leverage here, you would think. But what makes you feel like they're going to figure out a way to make this work?
Well, first of all, DeShaun, none of this has come from DeShaun. All of his unhappiness has been from the unnamed sources leaked to the national media. And Watson, in his last Zoom call with us last week, talked about what he wanted in a head coach, never brought up the general manager, just the head coach. And he wants what everybody wants. He wants a guy who's a leader, who can, a leader of men, a guy can help them hoist a Lombardi trophy, is what he said. I want to lift a Lombardi trophy. They hired a general manager who has 6 of them, 6 replicas and 6 rings, and Nick Caserio. And this is the 3rd time they tried to get Caserio. The Patriots wouldn't let him talk to him. And after the 2017 season, when they were looking for a replacement for Rick Smith, when they fired Brian Gaine a year and a half later, they reached out to Caserio. Nope, wouldn't do it again. This time, because of this new rule that allows people to interview if under contract, if it's promotion, and it was because he has control of personnel now for the first time. Bill Belichick has that in New England, of course. So everybody I talked to, including former Patriot offensive coordinator Charlie Weiss on NFL radio on Wednesday morning, just raves about Caserio. The media covers the team, former players, people that worked with him. All of them think he's going to do great. As you know, Mike, we don't know. Anytime somebody is perceived to be a good personnel man, until he gets control, you never know. But the people who have watched him closely think he'll do well. And they say he's a really good communicator. So once he sits down and talks to Watson, I think the conversation will go something like this. Yes, I'm going to keep you up to date on the coaching situation and tell me what you like. They've already told him it wouldn't be an offense or defense per se. They're going to take the guy they think is best. And I've thought for weeks, one of the hires, a general manager or a head coach, would be a minority. They had an African-American general manager, Rick Smith, for 12 years. And I think that now that they've hired Nick Caserio, I believe they'll hire a minority. I think that's important to the owner, Cal McNair. And they've interviewed a lot of minorities, and they're going to interview more. And I think Caserio, when he sits down with Watson, will tell him, you want to win a Super Bowl, right? He'll say, I do. He'll say, well, I know how. And it starts with a quarterback. That would be you. So let's work together to try to get this done. And Watson, knowing him the way I do, it may leak out anonymously that he wants a trade. He hasn't requested a trade yet. And because I know he's going to like Caserio. Okay. And it's Caserio's baby. He's our head coach. He started to work on Monday. He's got his own list. People say, oh, they reached out to Bieniemy. That's just for Watson. No, if they're going to do that, and it was going to be a fake interview request, they would have done it last week when they were getting beat up locally and nationally. And with Watson for not reaching out to Bieniemy, they could have done it last week, but they waited till Caserio got here because it's his decision. So I don't know who else he wants to talk to. He's talking to Leslie Frazier. He's talking to David Culley. the wide receivers coach, assistant head coach, and passing game coordinator at Baltimore, who a lot of people think is the brains behind their passing game. And there are going to be others. And Bieniemy, if you reached out to Bieniemy, Eric may say no. But this is all Casario's baby. He's got a lot of contacts in the league through agents because he oversaw contract negotiations, the draft, free agents, undrafted free agents. But Belichick had the final say, and now he does. And he can't rebuild this defense in one off season, right, especially without a 1 and a 2. But he's got 8 other picks starting in the 3rd round, and he may trade a couple players and get more. Well, we don't know, Mike. Will he come down here and try to do the Patriot way, get rid of older players while they have some value like J.J. Watt, who has 1 year left at $17 million, or will he come in and try to establish the Caserio way? We don't know, but it's going to be fun to watch.
One thing that I'm curious about, you say he's really highly, thought of and everything like that. The Patriots have an awful track record of drafting wide receivers. And wide receivers is something that DeShaun needs. Have you heard anything? We also don't know how much is Bill Belichick, as far as if talent was presented to him. What do you think, Caserio? And I know it's early, but have you gotten any sense on what Caserio thinks of this roster and what his plans are for supporting DeShaun?
Well, it's like it was here with Bill O'Brien. He signed off on everything over the last 2 years, and whether it was draft, free agents, and he didn't really care that much about the undrafted free agents. And Bill Belichick signed off on everything or made the picks in New England. So we don't know who decided to take N'Keal Harry over A.J. Brown, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But I'll guarantee you Belichick made their first-round picks. He made all their picks, but he went by the information that he had from his personnel department. And we've only met with Caserio once. Watson led the league in passing. He led the league in yards per attempt. He was second in rating, had 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and went 1 interception in his last 10 games. And he had his best percentage, and he was great. And he had Will Fuller, who they'll re-sign. He missed the last 5 games. Brandon Cooks had his 5th 1,000-yard season. He was really good. So if you're bringing back Fuller and Cooks, there's your 2 starters. Okay. And they have a bunch of other receivers. So that's not the priority. The priority is a running back. They have to get a running game to support Watson because the previous 2 years they were 9th and 8th in rushing. This year they were 31st and pathetic. And most important, they got to get an offensive line coach who can come in here, put in a new scheme, do something different for the offensive line. They got a lot of talent, including both starting tackles, but they need to try to make sure those interior guys play as well as they're capable. All the linemen, Mike, all of them didn't play as well as they played in 2019. A new coach has got to correct that.
And it's really important that they correct that because, like you said, they're not going to have a first, they're not going to have a second. They also got a lot of salary cap, restrictions that they're going to have. So it's going to take creativity, but you also have to be on those X's and O's with the coaching staff. If you were to name a couple things in addition to the offensive line and the run game, what else do you feel like this team needs to be able to get back into the ranks of the contenders if they have DeShaun Watson still as that centerpiece?
First of all, Mike, I think they need 2 things on offense, a running back and a right guard. That's all.
Okay.
Everything else is good. They got receivers, tight ends. They got the tackles. They've got 1 guard. They got a good center. They need a right guard. So then the salary cap, the floor is $175 million. If that's what it is, and everybody says it's going to be more, that they'd be 11 to 15 million over. So Nick Caserio come in there and slice and dice and get under it and sign a couple of free agents, like a free agent right guard, maybe a running back. We all know you can get a running back after the 3rd round. Mm-hmm. James Robinson was a free agent with Jacksonville this year, undrafted. But what they need on defense, they got 1 guy that consistently rushes the passer, J.J. Watt. And he had a career low 5 sacks, played 16 games, played much better than that 5 sacks says he does. NFL's Next Generation Stats, they had 2 statistics: beating your man in 2.5 seconds against the run and the pass. He was top 8 in both. He led the NFL in tackles for loss against the run. And teams got rid of the ball fast. And he got doubles, sometimes triples still. Nobody else. When O'Brien traded Devion Clowney, he wasn't a great pass rusher, but he was a good one, and he had to be accounted for. And when you had Clowney standing up on the other side, he had to have more than one guy. And so I think they've got to get a second pass rusher. If they play a 3-4, as they have since 2011 as their base defense, although they started a 4-3 times. But if they play a 3-4, they got to get a nose tackle. They had one in DJ Reader, and they let him go to Cincinnati for $13 million a year. They offered him 10. They gave Whitney Merciless, outside linebacker, $13 million. He had the worst season of his career, and I don't think he'll be back. They should have kept DJ Reader. And then in the secondary, Bradley Roby was their best corner. He was suspended for 5 games, plus the first one next year. I think besides Roby, they need 2 corners. They've got 3 safeties led by Justin Reed, and they're good at inside linebacker, and they need 1 or 2 outside linebackers. So that's 2 linemen, 2 corners to be number 2 and 3, 2 outside linebackers. Other than that, the defense is great.
How are they going to address this, though? Without a first rounder or a second rounder, how are you going to get that pass rushing help that you need? Because those impact guys are high picks, or you're going to have to spend a lot of money in free agency.
They're going to have to do like several teams has done, find some guy that you bring him in and say he was a 3 or 4 sack guy, but you think he'd fit well in your system. All of a sudden he's up 9 or 10. They've got a couple of young guys I thought would be better in their second, third seasons at getting a quarterback, but they haven't been. And one of the reasons secondary looks so bad was because they couldn't rush the quarterback and get persistent pressure on the passer. Now, Anthony Weaver was their first-year defensive coordinator, defensive line coach. I felt terrible for him, Mike. It's like he went into every game with one hand tied behind his back. He had 8 players out because of injuries or COVID-19 or Bradley Roby's suspension. And he was playing guys, should have been on special teams. That's where they played, was on special teams. And I feel like not only will Anthony get more chances to be a defensive coordinator, I think there's a good chance at some point he'll be a head coach.
I almost get a sense from talking to you here that maybe things aren't quite as bleak and dysfunctional as what they kind of seem on the outside. Because if you feel like DeShaun's still going to be here, that's a big thing right there. You feel like he's going to enjoy working with the new GM. That's another big thing right there. And considering his stats and production, they keep Will Fuller and they have Cooks. They've got the weapons right there. So is this possible that they could wind up turning this thing around sooner than what it looks like?
They'll play a third place schedule instead of a first place. And last time they played a schedule that wasn't first place in 2018, they finished 11-5. But they had Tyrann Mathieu, Devion Clowney, and DJ Reader on defense that they don't have now. So it's going to be, you can't redo that defense in one off season. You just got to get better. And then it doesn't have to be great, just better, because it can't be much worse. And then the rest would be up to the offense and Watson. The only place they really need to improve in the passing game is in the red zone. But when you don't have a running back and you get in a 5-yard line, as you know, Mike, that makes a tremendous difference. Yeah. So they got to get a running back. When they used to get inside the 5 with Arian Foster, he was gold because he could score. And they don't have to worry about anybody but Watson down there. And so that severely limits the offense. And based on how well they did in the AFC South, even though we're 2-4, how close they came to beating the 2 11-5 teams twice each, I tell people this. In 2014, Bill O'Brien inherited a 2-14 team with Ryan Fitzpatrick, Case Keenum, and Ryan Mallett starting games. They went 9-7. Second year he was here, they won the division. So if they can do that with O'Brien, with those quarterbacks, why couldn't they finish 9-7 against the third place schedule next year with DeShaun Watson?
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Who, if it's up to you, you can go out there and hire a head coach. Who's the best guy out there for DeShaun Watson and this team?
My favorite choice would have been, as I wrote and have broadcast, Robert Sala. Robert was here 6 years. He came in as low on the totem pole as you could get under Dom Capers in 05. Kubiak kept him in 06. He was there for 5 years under Kubiak, worked his way up to be an assistant linebackers coach. He and Kyle Shanahan became good friends. And then he left and went to Jacksonville, then went to Seattle, coached for Pete Carroll. Then he was reunited with Shanahan in San Francisco. Robert, as you know, has got a great personality, did a tremendous job with their defense, and they didn't reach out to him. They didn't reach out to him. And of the guys they have interviewed, I don't know enough about Joe Brady, other than he's only been in coaching 5 years.
Right.
I feel like he's too young. Everybody's looking for the next Sean McVay. And Sean McVays don't come around every other year. So the two that I have liked the best, Jim Caldwell. And people go, oh, Jim Caldwell, geez, you can do better than that. Jim turns 66 next week. He's got 2 Super Bowl rings, one as head coach, one as an offensive coordinator. If you can go 11-5 and 9-7 and 9-7 in Detroit, and you get fired after a 9-7 season because the GM from New England wants to hire Matt Patricia, and everybody likes Jim Caldwell. Tony Dungy was on the 5-man advisory council here, and he told Cal McNair, you should interview Jim Caldwell. You're going to like him, and they did. Okay. But now we got to see if Nick Caserio wants to interview him. So my choices would be Jim Caldwell or Eric Bieniemy. But Bieniemy, even though they reached out to him, he may decide not to interview. And if they go to the Super Bowl, we don't even know if there's going to be any opening left after the Super Bowl. I feel like if the Chiefs were to get upset by the Browns, Eric Bieniemy be a head coach somewhere next week. But they're probably going to win, and that would delay it another week. And I don't know, Eric, but you hear so many great things about him. He's interviewed enough. It's time for him to get a job. And if it's not him or Jim Caldwell, I don't really know, because Salah's not on their list. And they didn't reach out to Brian Daboll from Buffalo, didn't reach out to Arthur Smith of Tennessee. So I'm not exactly sure. But one of those two would be Salah would be number one, and then Bieniemy and Caldwell.
Are you surprised they didn't reach out to Daboll? Because didn't he have some connections with these Patriots guys when he was in New England?
No, I am and I'm not. Here's why, Mike. Nick Caserio's agent's Bob Lamont. Bob's got more coaches and front office people, I think, than everybody else combined. And Daboll's one of his clients. Caserio got to New England as a Gopher in 01. Daboll got there in 2000. Belichick's first season. They worked together there during 2 different stints. Caserio won 6 rings. Daboll won 5. And people think that Daboll's going to the Chargers to work with Justin Herbert and his high school buddy, general manager Tom Telesco. But I thought they would reach out to Arthur Smith, the offense coordinator in Tennessee. They have not. Last week, they reached out to Eberflus. He said no. I don't blame him, number one, because the guy who's going to hire him hadn't been hired, the general manager. So because I've thought that they're going to hire a minority in either of those positions, because they hired Caserio, I feel the head coach is going to be a minority, and that would rule out several of those guys. I could be wrong, but that's what I believe.
Okay. Now, do you hear anything about Tony Elliott from Clemson?
Tony Elliott's name has not come up anywhere here. I haven't seen anywhere in the NFL other than in some media reports about him being a guy who should be seriously considered in the NFL.
Yeah, I heard that he was a guy that was going to be on the radar, and I hadn't heard that. I hadn't heard anything since then. And then, obviously Watson, Clemson or whatever. I was just curious. It's always interesting because you hear 100 different names, and then some of those names are names that you wind up hearing, and then there are a lot of those names that they're just never any buzz about. So
I believe, Mike, they want to hire somebody with NFL experience, whether it's as a head coach like Marvin Lewis or Jim Caldwell, or whether it's one of the other candidates. I feel strongly about that. I've never seen them going to bring in any offensive coach.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm sorry, any college coach.
Okay, yeah, gotcha. And we know Jim Caldwell, great record as far as working with quarterbacks. He was Tony Dungy's offensive coordinator when they won. He was the OC in Baltimore when they won. Took over Tony Dungy as the head coach. Just a real quarterback tutor. How do you think that Marvin Lewis would do if he was in this position?
Marvin knows how to get to the playoffs because he's been to the playoffs a bunch. Never won a game, but he was a great defensive coordinator. They interviewed Marvin. Things went well, but I've heard things that they like Caldwell. But until Nick Caserio interviews him, he's not, to me, a serious candidate until Caserio's list is completed. And right now he's reached out to a bunch. Doesn't mean they will interview. We're waiting to hear about Bieniemy. We're not going to know that till he turns them down or says yes. And I think there'll be others out there. I just don't know who they are.
Last one. What do you think the point was of interviewing all these coaches before you hired your general manager, when they could have jumped on this general manager thing sooner, right? Why did they kind of do it in this order?
Everybody in the NFL is doing it. Everybody's interviewing all these coaches last week, even though they don't have their general manager. If you're willing to give the coach total control, like I guess Jacksonville is with Urban Meyer, I can see doing it. But here, they're not giving the coach total control anymore. That turned out to be a disaster with Bill O'Brien having control of personnel. Right. So it's going to be the way it was with Charlie Casserly and Dom Capers, Rick Smith and Gary Kubiak, and Rick Smith and O'Brien before O'Brien started working behind the scenes to get control of personnel. So they interviewed 5 GM candidates, and they wanted Caserio 2 times before. The owner had never talked to him. So he, along with Jack Easterby, their executive VP of football ops, flew up last week, picked him up in Bedford, Massachusetts. He got to visit for almost 4 hours with Cal McNair, the owner. And then the next day, they had another interview lined up with Trent Kirchner from Seattle, and Caserio had another one lined up with Carolina. And then after that, they did their official interview with Caserio and started working on the contract and got it done the next day. And they would have introduced him on Wednesday, except for everything that happened in the nation's capital. So they waited a day later, and we got to have our first Zoom with him on Friday. So Caserio wasn't right away them saying, let's get Nick Caserio. They had other guys that they wanted to interview. They interviewed early Louis Riddick because he was available, and he interviewed Omar Khan from Pittsburgh, liked him a lot. There was one report that they offered him the job. No, they didn't offer him the job. And that's the thing, Mike. There's a lot of misinformation out there around the country about, like, there's one report, Watson doesn't like the Caserio hire. No, that's not the problem. Watson wanted Cal McNair, the owner, to just give him the courtesy of a heads up. They were hiring him. And I'm guarantee you Cal McNair thought it was all about the head coach. So, Mike, one-on-one communication, whether it's you, me, an interview, whether it's anybody in a front office, instead of having all these things leaked by people close to you, communicate one-on-one. That almost always gets things worked out. In March of last year, national reports, Watson wants to be traded. He's mad about DeAndre Hopkins. Well, he was. Every player was mad about the Hopkins trade. But you know what? He somehow stayed here, had a great year, got a $156 million contract. And if somebody said he might sit out the year Give me a break. You're going to walk away from money to $10 million, and the next year's $35 million. And so the contract would toll, which would still be $10 million the year after. So that serves no purpose for anybody. And that's not the DeShaun Watson I know, who's as competitive as any quarterback I've seen, Mike. That goes back, I've covered Dan Pastorini, Kenny Stabler, Warren Moon, Steve McNair with the Oilers, and the best quarterback before Watson I've covered here was Matt Schaub. And Watson's competitiveness is as tough. He's as tough, mentally tough as any player I've ever seen. He wants to win. He hasn't lost. This is the first time he's frustrated. So is everybody in the organization with this season. And now it's up to Nick Caserio to get it turned around.
All right. And we were going to continue following along your coverage because I know you'll be documenting it all. I really appreciate your insight and setting the record straight on all of this. I don't feel quite as bad about them. I don't know exactly still what's going to happen with their head coach, but I don't feel it's quite as bleak now that I know that, DeShaun Watson's not on his way out the door tomorrow, and that there's not as quite as bleak a situation with them turning their roster around either. So thanks for shedding light on that.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me do it.
Tell everybody again where they can find your work.
My Twitter handle's McClain, MCCLAIN, McClain_on_NFL. I can be found in HoustonChronicle.com. We have a sports website called Texas Sports Nation. Mike, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's always good to talk to you. I hope you have a great off season.
All right. Thank you so much, John. And I wish I could say I'll see you soon. I don't think we'll see you at the Combine this year. We don't know what's going to happen, but it's good to see you virtually here. And I will talk to you soon.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. All right, a big thank you to John McClain. Go online and check out his work if you are not already. We're going to be watching this. It's going to be interesting to see. I found it very interesting that he is very convinced that Sean's not going anywhere. To hear the rumor mill, it sounds like it's chaos and that he's going somewhere and going to force his way out. And to hear John tell it, it sounds like, he's pretty optimistic that they're going to figure some things out, ease Watson's mind, surround him with some more good talent, and get this thing headed the right direction. It will be interesting to see what they do at head coach. I was down on them for not interviewing Eric Bieniemy, but now, as we hear it, they hadn't even had their general manager in place. So I guess they were interviewing head coaches that had experience being the top personnel guy, and they interviewed general manager candidates. They went with the GM now, and now they're going to go with the head coach who doesn't have full personnel say. So maybe, it's not dead yet for Bieniemy. I think he would do great work for DeShaun Watson, really help him. But we shall see. But keep it tuned here. We will be having the NFL playoffs this weekend, big weekend, divisional round, and I will be back on Monday or Tuesday, depending on how my guest schedule lines up. My travel, I will be in New Orleans for that game, so I'm traveling back on Monday. So probably Tuesday, we'll hit you back with another episode of the Football Jones podcast. Again, you can read me at usatoday.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram @ByMikeJones. Do me a favor, please. Share this podcast with your friends. Send it to them and post it on your social media. Let's get everybody on board. Thanks, and have a great day.